I let it happen. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to say out loud, and I've had plenty of hard moments in 68 years. I let it happen. I watched the warning signs stack up like unpaid bills on a kitchen counter, and I kept telling myself it wasn't my place to say anything. She was an adult. She was in love. Who was I to stand in the way? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where everything started, back when I still believed I had done everything right. My name is Harold, and for most of my adult life, I was a structural engineer. I spent 34 years making sure buildings didn't fall down. I understood load-bearing walls. I understood the point at which pressure becomes too great for a structure to hold. I understood, professionally, that things collapse when you ignore the warning signs long enough. I just never thought to apply that knowledge to my own family. My wife, Patricia, passed away 6 years ago from pancreatic cancer. She was 59 years old. We had been married 31 years. When she died, the only thing I had left that still connected me to her, the only thing that still felt like home, was our daughter, Ashley. Ashley was 26 when we lost her mother. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness, and I loved her fiercely for both. After Patricia died, I threw everything I had into making sure Ashley was okay. I paid off her student loans, $62,000. I paid her rent for 2 years while she found her footing in her marketing career. I co-signed her car. I was there every Sunday for dinner, and when she called at 11 at night because she had a panic attack, I answered on the first ring. I want to be clear about something, because I've thought about this a great deal since everything fell apart. I didn't do those things to buy her love. I did them because I was her father and she was grieving and I was grieving, and for a while, taking care of her was the only way I knew how to take care of myself. But looking back now, I can see what I was doing. I was making it easy for her to never have to stand on her own. And a person who never learns to stand on their own eventually starts to believe that the ground beneath them is someone else's job to maintain. Ashley met Derek about 3 years ago at a company event. He was a lifestyle influencer. That's what he called himself. A lifestyle influencer. He had 280,000 followers on Instagram and a YouTube channel where he reviewed luxury hotels and high-end restaurants and occasionally posted what he described as mindset content, which as far as I could tell was just videos of him standing in front of expensive cars saying things like, "Your vibe determines your tribe." I will be honest. From the first dinner, something about Derek made the back of my neck tighten. He had the particular kind of confidence that doesn't come from having done anything difficult. He talked about himself the way a man talks about himself when he hasn't yet been tested by anything real. He was charming in the way that people are charming when they've practiced it, and he looked at Ashley not the way a man looks at someone he loves, but the way a man looks at something that makes him look good. But Ashley was happy, and I kept telling myself that my instincts were just the instincts of a grieving widower who didn't want to share his daughter with anyone. I kept telling myself I was being unfair. So when Derek proposed to Ashley at a rooftop restaurant in downtown Chicago 18 months ago, and Ashley called me crying with joy, I told her I was happy for her. And I mostly meant it. The problems started quietly, the way they always do. The first thing was the house. Patricia and I had owned our home in Naperville for 28 years. It was a 4-bedroom colonial on a tree-lined street, and it was worth, by then, somewhere around $470,000. When Patricia died, the house passed to me, and I had always assumed that one day it would pass to Ashley. It was the family home. It had Ashley's handprints in the concrete of the back patio from when she was 7 years old. Patricia's rose bushes were still growing along the fence. It meant something. About 4 months after the engagement, Ashley came to me with an idea. She and Derek wanted to build their life somewhere new, she said. They had found a place they loved in Scottsdale, Arizona. Derek believed the desert climate would be good for his content. They needed capital to get started. And rather than let the Naperville house sit there generating sentimental value, wouldn't it make more sense for me to sell it and use the proceeds to help them launch their life together? She sat at my kitchen table with a printed spreadsheet. I remember staring at that spreadsheet for a long time. It had line items for a down payment on a home in Scottsdale, furniture, a content creation studio for Derek, Ashley's seed capital for a freelance marketing business she wanted to start, and 3 months of living expenses while they got settled. The total was $448,000. She was asking me to liquidate everything Patricia and I had built together so that her boyfriend could film himself reviewing tequila flights in Arizona. I said no. I said it clearly, and I said it kindly. But I said no. 2 weeks later, Ashley stopped answering my Sunday calls. A week after that, Derek sent me a long text message about how it was important for parents to trust their children's vision and how holding on to material possessions was a form of emotional control. I didn't respond. But I also didn't sleep well for about a month. In December, Ashley came back. She cried. She apologized. She said Derek had put the idea in her head and she hadn't thought about how it would feel for me to leave the house. She said she understood if I was upset with her. She said she missed me. I forgave her. I always forgave her. Because she was all I had left of Patricia, and because I genuinely believed she was being influenced by someone I didn't yet understand the full extent of. What I did do was this. I sold the house anyway, not because Ashley asked me to, but because living there alone had become its own kind of grief. I sold it in February, cleared $461,000 after fees, and I put $380,000 into a certificate of deposit and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Evanston. I told Ashley only that I had sold the house. I didn't tell her what I did with the money. I see now why that was a mistake. Because she assumed. The wedding planning began in earnest in the spring. Ashley and Derek had decided on a destination wedding in Sedona, Arizona, because Derek liked the aesthetic for content purposes. They had picked a venue that I can only describe as a curated canyon experience. The catering was farm to table. The florals were quoted to me by Ashley as architectural. The total budget, she explained over dinner at my apartment in April, was $220,000. She explained this to me the way someone explains a budget to an investor. Line by line, venue deposit, catering per head, for 140 guests, florals, photographer, videographer, hair and makeup team, rehearsal dinner, shuttle service, overnight accommodations for out-of-town guests, honeymoon in the Maldives. She had it all organized in a shared Google Doc that she pulled up on her phone. At the bottom of the Google Doc was a line that said, "Dad's contribution to be discussed." I asked her what she had in mind. She said she was thinking I could cover the venue, catering, and honeymoon. I asked her what Derek's family was contributing. She said Derek's parents were retired and on a fixed income. I asked her what Derek himself was contributing, given that he was a grown man of 36. She said Derek's income was project-based and unpredictable. I told her I needed some time to think. I want to tell you about something that happened in between that dinner and my answer, because it changed everything. A former colleague of mine, a man named George, who had moved to Phoenix after retirement, had been following Derek's social media because Ashley had tagged me in a few posts. George sent me an email in May with the subject line, "Thought you should know." George had done some digging because, he said, Derek's name had come up in a Facebook group for people who had been scammed by influencer brand deals. In that email, George included 3 attachments. The first was a court filing from Cook County showing that Derek was currently being sued by a company called Luminary Brands for $94,000 in unpaid sponsored content fees. Apparently, Derek had taken advance payment for a campaign, delivered none of the agreed deliverables, and then stopped responding to the brand's emails. The second was a screenshot of a thread in a consumer advocacy forum where several small business owners described working with Derek on promotional deals and receiving either nothing or fraudulent analytics reports showing reach numbers that independent verification tools showed were fabricated. 3 of them mentioned that Derek's follower count appeared to be significantly inflated by purchased accounts. The third was a PDF of public records from a courthouse in Nashville, Tennessee, showing that Derek had been previously engaged to a woman named Courtney, that Courtney had taken out a restraining order against him following the end of that engagement, and that there were associated civil proceedings related to, among other things, approximately $30,000 in personal loans she had given him that he never repaid. I sat with those 3 documents for a long time. I want to tell you exactly what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I did not feel vindicated. I did not feel the satisfaction of having been right about someone. I felt sick. I felt the particular nausea of a parent who realizes that the person his child loves is not who she thinks he is, and that every door he might walk through to tell her that is a door she has already locked from the inside. Because here is what I understood about Ashley at that point. She had stopped answering my calls when I wouldn't fund their life in Scottsdale. She had come back when she wanted something from me. And the wedding, I now understood, was not just a wedding. It was the next funding round. And Derek was the one who had designed it that way. I called Ashley and asked if we could have dinner. She was warm and enthusiastic, which told me she was expecting a check. Over dinner, I gently, very gently, told her I had heard some things about Derek that concerned me. I told her about the lawsuit with Luminary Brands. I did not mention the restraining order. Ashley put down her fork. She looked at me the way people look at someone who has just said something unforgivable. She said that George was an old man who didn't understand the influencer industry. She said that brand disputes were common and that Derek's side of the story was more complicated. She said that I had never liked Derek, and this was clearly just an excuse. Then she said something I have been thinking about every day since. She said, "Dad, Derek told me you might do something like this. He said you'd try to find a way to control us by attacking his reputation." I drove home that night very quietly. I made myself a cup of tea and I sat in my apartment, and I thought about Patricia and about what she would have done. Patricia had a saying. She used to say, "You can't want something for someone more than they want it for themselves." She usually said it about other people's children. I never thought I'd say it about our own. I decided to give it one more chance. I sent Ashley a text the next day saying I was sorry for how the conversation had gone and that I wanted to be there for her wedding. I asked if we could start over. She called me 3 days later. Her voice was bright and businesslike. She said she had been thinking, and she believed the best way forward was for us to focus on the positive. She said she had been talking with Derek and they understood that I had concerns, but they hoped I could put them aside for the sake of the family. And then she told me that they had finalized the wedding budget and that given the sale of the Naperville house, which she described as a significant asset you no longer have costs on, they were hoping I could contribute $195,000 to cover the venue, the catering, and the Maldives honeymoon. $195,000. I asked her if that figure included my guest accommodations, since Sedona was a destination for me too. She said that actually, they had been thinking about that. The wedding venue had a limited number of guest slots, and they had a lot of Derek's friends and content industry connections who needed to be accommodated, and they were hoping I could understand that this was really a celebration for them and their community, and that it might be better if we did a separate, smaller family dinner before the wedding, just her and me, so I could feel included without disrupting the day. I was not invited to my own daughter's wedding, but I was expected to pay $195,000 for it. I told her I needed a few days to think. She said of course and told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too, because I did. I do. That has never been in question. Now, here is where I want to stop for a moment and tell you something honestly, because I think it's important and because I think some of you might be feeling what I felt in that moment. I was not angry in the way you might expect. I was not the kind of angry that makes you want to shout or break things. I was the kind of angry that goes very still and very clear. I was the kind of angry that comes from looking at a situation for a long time and finally seeing it exactly as it is, without any of the fog of love or hope or wishful thinking. I saw it now. All of it. I saw that Derek had spent 2 years mapping my relationship with Ashley, identifying the leverage points, and systematically repositioning himself as the authority on what was real and what wasn't. I saw that every time Ashley had pulled away from me, it had been after a conversation with Derek. I saw that the spreadsheet, the Google Doc, the budget conversation, none of it had been Ashley's idea. Ashley was not a villain. Ashley was a 29-year-old woman who had lost her mother young and then found someone who made her feel certain in a world that had been very uncertain, and she had handed him the keys to everything because certainty felt like safety. And I was the threat to his certainty. So I had to be managed. I also saw something else. I saw that what I did next would determine whether I lost my daughter permanently or whether I gave her a chance to one day, maybe years from now, understand what had happened. If I walked away and said nothing, Derek would tell the story forever. He would be the visionary she chose, and I would be the controlling father who never believed in them. If I confronted her directly again, I would lose. He had already inoculated her against exactly that. So I thought about it for a week, and then I did what an engineer does. I looked at the structure. I identified the load-bearing element, and I figured out exactly how much pressure it could hold before it came down. The load-bearing element was the wedding itself. Not because I wanted to ruin it. I want to be very clear about that. What I wanted was for Ashley to see the truth before she legally, financially, and emotionally bound herself to a man who had defrauded businesses, borrowed money he had no intention of repaying, and had a restraining order filed against him by a woman he had previously promised to love and protect. I had one shot to do this, and it had to be done in a way that didn't look like an attack from a jealous father. It had to look like information, clean, factual, documented information. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I compiled everything George had sent me. I added to it. I found the Luminary Brands lawsuit docket online and downloaded the complete filing. I located 3 of the business owners from the forum thread, and 2 of them agreed to write brief statements confirming their experiences. I found public records confirming the Nashville civil proceedings. And I found something else, something that stopped me cold when I came across it. A business registration in Arizona showing that Derek had formed an LLC 6 weeks after meeting Ashley, with a business address that matched the Scottsdale property they had asked me to fund. He had already planned this. He had already drawn the map. Ashley was the funding source, and the wedding was the closing ceremony. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in October. The rehearsal dinner was Friday evening, which I was also not invited to. 140 guests were flying in from around the country. On Thursday evening, I sent an email. The email went to 106 people. I had compiled the guest list through a combination of the wedding website that Ashley had made public and cross-referencing Derek's social media following. The email was clean and professional. The subject line was, "Important information regarding the upcoming wedding of Ashley and Derek." The body of the email stated clearly that I was Ashley's father, that I was sharing this information out of concern for my daughter's well-being, and that I believed the guests, many of whom were also family and close friends of Ashley's, deserved to know what I had found. I attached all the documents, the lawsuit, the statements from the business owners, the Nashville records, the Arizona LLC registration. I did not editorialize. I did not name-call. I wrote, "I love my daughter, and I am not trying to hurt her. I am trying to make sure she is not hurt by someone else." I pressed send at 7:14 inches the evening. Then I made myself dinner and I watched a baseball game and I waited. Ashley called me at 9:47. She was crying. She was so angry I could barely understand what she was saying. She used words I hadn't heard her use since she was a teenager. She said I had ruined her life. She said she would never forgive me. She said Derek had an explanation for everything and I had ambushed him and humiliated her in front of every person who mattered to them. I let her talk. When she stopped, I told her I loved her. I told her I wasn't going to apologize for making sure she had the information she needed. I told her I knew she was furious and she had every right to be, and that I would be here when she was ready to talk. She hung up. The wedding did not happen. It did not happen because Derek, when confronted with the documents by Ashley and then by several guests, including her aunt and 2 of her closest friends, did not deny the Luminary Brands lawsuit. He said it was complicated. He did not deny the Nashville restraining order. He said Courtney had been unstable. He did not explain the Arizona LLC to Ashley's satisfaction. He said it was a tax structure. But Ashley's best friend from college, a woman named Renee, who had known Ashley since freshman year, told Ashley something that I believe was the thing that finally reached her. Renee told Ashley that she had met Derek once, a year earlier, at a birthday party I hadn't been invited to, and that Derek had spent 40 minutes talking to Renee about which of Ashley's friends had money and what their family situations were. Renee had thought it was strange but hadn't known what to make of it. Now she knew. The wedding was canceled Friday morning. Derek moved out of their apartment by Friday afternoon, which told its own story about how committed he had actually been. When a man leaves in 4 hours, he already had somewhere to go. Ashley did not speak to me for 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were among the hardest of my life, including the months after Patricia died, because at least then I knew that what I had lost was not by choice. She called me on a Sunday in late November. She called at the time we used to always talk, the time slot we had held every week for years. It was the first time in over a year that she had called at that time without wanting something. She said she was sorry. She said it simply and directly, and without conditions, which told me she had done a lot of thinking. She said she had been talking to a therapist. She said she could see now, looking back, how systematically Derek had worked to separate her from me. She said she felt foolish, and I told her she had nothing to feel foolish about, and I meant it completely. Then she said something that cracked me open in the best possible way. She said, "Mom would have figured it out in the first 5 minutes, wouldn't she?" And I laughed for the first time in a long time, and I said, "She would have figured it out before he finished his appetizer." We had dinner that week. We have had dinner every Sunday since. I want to say something to anyone watching this who might be in a version of this situation right now. Maybe you're the parent who keeps making excuses for someone your child has brought home. Maybe you're watching the warning signs stack up and telling yourself it's not your place. Maybe you're calculating what it will cost you to say something against what it will cost you to stay silent. I stayed silent for 2 years. I told myself I was respecting her autonomy. I told myself my instincts were just the biases of a man who didn't want to let go. And I was partially right. But mostly I was afraid. I was afraid that if I pushed back, I would lose her. I didn't understand that by staying quiet, I was already losing her to someone who was using her the way people use a credit line. The truth did not destroy my relationship with my daughter. It was the only thing that saved it. Ashley is doing well. She went back to her full-time marketing job, and she's been promoted since. She sold the Scottsdale place she had been planning to buy with Derek and used the deposit she had saved to take herself to Portugal for 2 weeks, where she called me every other day to tell me about the food. She sounds like herself again. She sounds like the person she was before. A little sharper now, maybe. A little more careful, but whole. I still have my apartment in Evanston. I have the CD that I never told Ashley about, earning its interest quietly. I have a standing Sunday dinner that I guard like a structural engineer guards a load-bearing wall. I have a good life, and a clear conscience, and a daughter who is safe. And somewhere in Scottsdale, Derek is pitching his next investor. I have no doubt about that. But that investor is not my daughter. And that, more than anything else I can think of, lets me sleep at night. I was wrong to wait as long as I did. I was wrong to confuse silence with respect and patience with protection. But I got there. I got there in time. And if you're a parent sitting somewhere right now wondering whether you're making the same mistake I made, I hope this story is useful to you. Not as a cautionary tale, and not as a how-to guide, but as a reminder that love is not passive. Real love, the kind Patricia would have recognized, the kind that holds its shape under pressure, is sometimes the hardest possible thing to do at exactly the moment when doing nothing would feel so much easier. If you've been through something like this, or if you're going through it right now, I'd like to hear from you in the comments. You're not alone in this. None of us are.